All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. So this call is to review the what is now going to be FIP 20. Hopefully more impactful than ERC 20 on the community. So, so the purpose is to review the kind of the program. This is primarily focusing on how the program is going to operate at the chain level. So that's why we're going to be looking at the FIP. There is still, a number of variables that could be adjusted. This is just a draft. I just published this today. But what I'd like to do is review this with this group and potentially make any tweaks that we feel should be made. And then obviously the next step will be to communicate this FIP more broadly with the community and kind of seek everybody's input. But I thought it'd be good if we kind of can hone in on some of the numbers here before we do that. So we're kind of a little closer. We don't have to finalize anything. A lot of this can actually be changed in terms of variables way into the development of this FIP. But obviously, the more accurate we are upfront, that I think the easier it is for the community to kind of absorb what is actually likely going to happen as opposed to something totally different. There is also another meeting that David scheduled for tomorrow that's going to cover some of the other pieces around the co-op in terms of other tools that we may want to develop to make this program easier for the user to interact with. But this call today is focused only on the kind of chain level functionality. And lastly, there has obviously been a number of iterations of this program. I think two major ones, and this is like a third. We did scale it down a bit, primarily to limit the complexity of the program. So it doesn't include, like one of the key things that was scaled down was it no longer awards those points if you lock tokens, and it doesn't allow you to kind of continue to accrue the points. You basically get the points allocated once, and that's been done primarily for the complexity. But let me spend maybe 5-10 minutes just walking through the core concepts, and then I'll kind of open it up to everybody to have a dialogue and see if there's something we want to change. So I'm gonna skip the abstract. I'm going to skip the motivation. You guys know why we're doing it. So basically, the concept is that we are introducing what's called FIOPs here. But by the way, for the marketing people on the call, if you guys read through this document and you want to start using better terminology, please let me know so I can update that. For the most part, it's all kind of backend, so nobody cares anyway. But there will be like endpoints created, action names created, references to this FIP. So if we can, it'd be better if there's some obvious terminology changes that we want to make and call this something other than co-op, or call the points something other than FIOPs, or whatever the case might be. Let me know, and I'll be glad to update it, and we'll kind of have common terminology going forward. And it's not the end of the world if the blockchain calls it something else and then we market it as something else. But if we can get it right to begin, I think it will be easier. Yes, David?
Just to emphasize, a FIP is not a marketing document, right? So this is not intended in any way, shape, or form to be a marketing document. It is the framework for the specification.
Yes, thank you. That is a very important note. This is not intended to be kind of circulated among users or anything like that. This is really a functional specification that says, here's how we want to modify the protocol to accomplish this. So obviously, based on that, we can create all sorts of other collateral communication or what have you that kind of explains this program to end users in a totally different way.
Does the it as currently constructed, does the end user ever see the FIOP, or are they just dealing in FIO the whole way? They just and the FIOP is just the mechanisms that are generating the new FIO to the holders.
So that would be a question that we can discuss tomorrow when we're going to be talking about the tools. It's up to us to decide how we want to promote this to the user. Obviously, at the chain level, there are going to be FIOPs. Now, we
Right.
can totally hide that concept from the user if we choose to do so, and use other language to communicate. That's totally fine.
Okay, fine. Okay. Okay.
All right. So the concept is based on the points, right? So FIOP is basically the FIO points, and anytime you register a FIO address or a FIO domain, you're being awarded FIOPs. The FIOPs that you're being awarded are primarily driven by two things. They're actually, I say three things. How much you have paid.
Do you want to hear?
How much you have paid was for either the FIO address and FIO domain. So obviously, if you register a FIO domain, you're gonna get X times more than a FIO address because it's just more expensive. So that's one dimension. The other is how many seconds since the program launch you have actually registered, because the way the program works is it rewards people less as time goes on. So I can actually show this little model that I have here just for illustration purposes. So let me make this bigger. So this kind of shows you how many FIOPs you get, and this is obviously assuming actually FIOPs for a FIO address registration. So you will actually, if you register a FIO address in second 0 when the program starts, you're going to get 1 FIOP. If you register it a month later, you're going to get 0.94. A year later, 0.53, and then 3 years later, 15. And we're still playing with those numbers, so don't don't look at the specific numbers, but just to illustrate the concept that the FIOPs that are being awarded to you are basically gradually declining as time goes on. And currently, it is assumed that the plan is going to end after 3 years. So the FIOPs will only be awarded for the first 3 years of running the program at this kind of sliding scale. So you get fewer and fewer. And after 3 years, there are no more FIOPs being awarded. However, the payouts continue. So let me cover now the registration. I know there's been a lot of questions, and what happens to the people that have registered the FIO, their FIO address or domain prior to the program launch. So the current thinking is that, let me just, sorry, get this annotation off. So, so the way that this is currently proposed is that all of the FIO addresses and FIO domains will be awarded FIOPs at the program launch. And the number of FIOPs that will be awarded is as if they have registered their FIO address or domain at the start of the program, meaning in second 0. So they, for example, would get a full FIOP if they registered a FIO address, with a couple of modifications. One is they will also get a bonus depending on when they registered. So if they registered at mainnet, so that would be primarily your users that have participated in the pre-sale and registered domains and addresses before we even launched mainnet, they would get 20% increase in FIOP. So instead of 1 FIOP, they will get 1.2 FIOP. If they registered between mainnet and when the program starts, they would get a 10% bonus. So they would get 1.1 FIOP instead of 1. And the way we are going to accomplish this is we're basically just going to manually identify all of those NFTs and basically just as part of the launch of the program, award those individual FIOPs to those individual addresses. There's one other important distinction, and that is the that for FIO address, since bulk of the FIO addresses that we have given out or that were registered were actually given away for free by the foundation. And out of that, there has been some that have been Sybil attacked, so potentially in control by some attacker. So the way that is going to work for those FIO addresses is we're going to compute the FIOP and we're going to attach it to the FIO address as, hey, we know that you're supposed to get 1.1 or 1.2 FIOP, but we're not actually going to grant it to the FIO address until they renew it. And that is intended to basically protect from anybody that, could have potentially abused the system or potentially might still abuse the system, through free FIO address registration. So basically, the user will have to renew their FIO address after the program launches to unlock the FIOPs they would have otherwise received. So they're still receiving the higher amount, recognizing when they registered, but they do have to renew their FIO address. And that rule only applies to the FIO address. It does not apply to the domain, since all of the domains were basically fully paid for. I'm gonna pause here. Any questions? All right, so I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I have a question.
On the way you talked about doing it, you mentioned doing it manually. Would it be kind of similar to how we did mainnet launch, in that there'd be some kind of data table or something it would read from? As far as, like, I'm trying to understand how the actual code will compute this. I don't know.
Sure. So we'll still, obviously, we haven't, even though I've been talking to Ed a lot throughout this process, we haven't really finalized all of the technical approach. So it's, I guess, up still to be decided. But I would envision it would be done the same way as it was done at mainnet, where there was a file put together manually, right? So there's a file saying these people need to get tokens or these people need to get domains, and there was basically a script run that took each one of those and say, okay, this guy gets these many tokens, these addresses and these domains. Be kind of somewhat similar process, but again, it has not been finalized yet.
Well, I was just saying, but the difference would be in this case is that would have to be run on chain completely as part of the change. Okay, all right. So
is there a way? Is there a way just to take a snapshot of the accounts at that moment?
Yeah, that's what the CSV file would be, but you actually still have to do something on chain with that data. And that's what this is just something I've not seen before. It's basically an airdrop done completely on chain, and that's no simple task.
Well, it's just I don't want to get into too much detail on this, but I'm assuming that again, this is going to be deployed by the BPs. It's going to be a system, update to their system contracts, right? So the BPs would likely have to basically call multiple, an action that basically just awards those FIOPs to the individual users, probably through a multi-sig. But again, let's not design this at this point. That's kind of something that obviously we'll be working on, trying to find the right solution.
Cool. Just good to know that you guys are thinking about the detailed complexity. So I may ask a couple questions like that as we're going through this, just because if I poke at something and we're like, holy frick, we never even thought of that, and it might actually change the design as we describe it. So I'll just poke at stuff, and I basically all I'm looking for is, yep, we thought about that. Ed and I are working on it. We've got a plan, or we're going to spike it out, or whatever. Sounds good?
Yeah, definitely poke, especially that's why, Ed, you're on the call so that you can kind of take a mental note of all those pokes and then, start thinking about them, so that if there are any issues, we uncover them sooner rather than later.
Pavel, I love this idea of paying attention to the existing holders. And I think that they're really important from a marketing perspective, which we can discuss, what the functionality is tomorrow. So I love this. Is there a way that we're going to be able to contact those holders directly, or are we going to have to do this through some indirect marketing?
Only with the pre-sale, we have email addresses for most of the people who participated in the pre-sale, but after that, we're a decentralized protocol, so we haven't been collecting emails, and we talked about adding an optional email field to the registration site, and there's no technical challenge with that. The challenge is that we're a protocol, and that's integrated into other wallets, and you can't just do that without talking to the wallets and making sure they're not going to be freaked out that all of a sudden the registration site is collecting email addresses.
Okay, so this conversation is part of what we're going to cover tomorrow. Let's focus this conversation on the on-chain functionality specifically.
Okay.
So I might increase the after mainnet to 15%, Pavel, like we discussed. I mean, that is the most important part of the incentive here is the after. Oh, I'm sorry. After mainnet, but before program start, I would change that to 15%. That's the incentive that's actually going to make a difference. The at mainnet
I agree.
is nice, but it actually doesn't help us at all now.
I agree. It's people who came in after mainnet who found us and who registered and went through the action.
Somebody's talking.
Yeah, James, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So I agree with David. I think it's those people who came on and found us after mainnet and who went through the registration process. Those are, to me, the early adopters that we really want to try and give, a flag to carry around to induce virality for us.
Well, it's not. Yeah, I mean, the reason I said is less. It's a little bit about that. It's more about once we announce the program, what's going to incentivize people to actually act now. And this bonus is one of the elements that will cause them to act now versus wait for the co-op program to go live.
Okay, so hold that thought, David. Let's keep walking through this, and then we can kind of come back and revisit some of those numbers. So moving on, duration I've already described, 3 years. Life cycles. So the idea is that FIOPs never expire. They're attached to the NFT permanently. They always are part of that NFT. The only way that they are actually removed or destroyed is when the NFT itself is destroyed, which happens if it expires and a renewal fee is not paid. So when the NFT is burned, the FIOPs will be permanently destroyed as well. FIOPs cannot be transferred by themselves, but the FIO address or domain can be transferred. And when it is transferred, the attached FIOPs are transferred with it. So if somebody registers a domain and it has X number of FIOPs, and they transfer it to a new owner, not that owner is going to benefit from having those that NFT with those FIOPs attached.
I had a question about the FIOP lifecycle. So essentially, there's no cap to these, right? Like the more and more addresses that get and domains that get minted prior to the 3-year cutoff, the more the FIOPs. It's basically like share dilution, right? And nothing really changes. Like there's not some maximum supply that we intend to distribute that would then change if some get burned or anything like that, right?
Correct. That's the current thinking, is that it's unlimited. It just gets issued, and obviously as it issues, it dilutes everybody. And then after 3 years, it's no longer issued. Whatever's been issued by that time is what's out there, and it'll just can potentially get reduced if somebody doesn't renew their NFT, but it cannot go up.
Okay.
P distribution, so that's a big change to the protocol, which is basically on-chain redirection of fees. Currently, the fees are distributed 85% to block producers, 10% to TPIT, 5% to the foundation. And what we're effectively proposing is taking 10% from block producers and allocating them to the FIO holders. So effectively, the core value of the program is that out of every fee that is paid on the chain in perpetuity, 10% will always get distributed to the FIOP holders. So if you're holding FIOP, a percentage of whatever is the circulating supply of those FIOPs, you will be getting a share of that 10%. That's basically the value proposition here.
I just want a mental note here. I know we're going to discuss numbers later, that one of our VPs did actually respond and say, originally when we talked about going to 65%, because we included the holding part, they were like, why don't you go even further down? Instead of taking 25%, take 35%. So
yeah, we added it 12.5 in the last version. I see you dropped it to 10, Baba, which I'm guessing is because we added in this bounty thing. Was that your thinking?
Yes, and I also felt like you shouldn't like do 12.5. It'll be easier if it's 10, and since 10 is also on the TPIT. But if we want to raise this to 15 or 20, then I'm totally fine with that. I'd probably suggest just going in 5 increments.
Yeah, I do want to maybe towards the end of the call talk about this, because like a lot of protocols, like I'm thinking about Hive or whatever, like most of the rewards go to not just to the BPs, right? So anyway, there's a lot of flexibility we can have for this, and in order to make it really exciting, I do think it has to be more than just like, dust, ideally.
Okay. Next, we are talking about distribution period. So this is basically when you are going to receive the distribution. So we have some issues, concerns about performance, since the blockchain is not the best database for that kind of stuff. So we spent a lot of time kind of thinking about what is the right interval here from a technical standpoint. Now David is working with some Monte Carlo modeling to try to figure out what is the best number from a kind of business standpoint. So I'm not sure what we end up with. 30 days is kind of what we're proposing right now. I think we could probably go lower from a technical standpoint, but I think once you start really going low, then there is some concerns that this is too low. So if again, this number is basically every 30 days, the blockchain is going to say, okay, now it's time to pay those rewards to the FIOP holders. It's going to look at who is holding FIOPs, how many fees has been collected in the last 30 days, and it's just basically going to distribute those. There will be a maintenance code built that is going to be run by block producers most likely, but anybody can call it. That would just iterate, look at the balance and complete the payments, not too different from kind of how paying TPITs works. What we are also here proposing is what's called FIOP holders bounty. So what we're saying is that after that 30 days is over and we've collected X FIO in fees, we're actually going to increase the amount of FIO to distribute to the users by minting new tokens. So again, very similar to new user bounties, which right now the TPIT reward is at 50%. The other 40 is actually minted on demand. So this kind of similar concept where there'll be 10 million FIO cap, and the pot is going to be increased by a decreasing percentage. So the first pot is going to be doubled. The next pot is going to be increased by 95%, 90%, and so on. So for the first 600 days, the pot will be greater than the fees collected.
I have two questions on those. Do you want me to come back?
Sure.
So first question is the FIO address, register FIO address fee being the threshold. When I first looked at the spreadsheet, it was like, I don't know, years before, many, many months before you'd get like your full FIO back. If you spent $2 worth of FIO to register an address, for example, am I understanding this correctly, that you would only get a payout once you've reached that threshold?
Yes. So the thinking is that you want to have a threshold for how for when you actually receive the tokens, because the transfer token action on the blockchain is actually a pretty expensive call. And rather than making this call on every single little, if you get like 0.00001 FIO,
no, I
you
fully
don't
agree.
want
You
to.
need a threshold for it. Fully agree to that, and I understand that. I'm just concerned that this threshold seems to me to be so high. There's almost no tangible benefit, right? They're not seeing anything increase in their account in a way that makes sense to them necessarily.
Yeah. So if it's going to take years for, and I'm not sure what model you're looking at, but if it's going to take years for somebody to get $2, then something's not right with the modeling that that we're looking at, because irrespective of the payment frequency, that's just not very attractive. So I agree that it should be more immediate than that. My thinking, and I'm not stuck at the $2 or the registration fee, was that the primary way the users are going to spend it is probably just renew their FIO address, right? Rather than if they have a quarter of a FIO, what are they going to do with it? So that's kind of my thinking, but I'm totally open on changing this amount.
What are the current charges for transferring tokens from one account to another?
I don't know, but I can check.
I think it's about 5 cents or so in terms of US dollar terms, but that is something we also discussed, that someday we might be able to make cheaper, because it kind of assumes the worst case scenario that you're creating an account with every transfer, which you're not necessarily. But maybe correct me if I'm wrong, David, but when I looked at your spreadsheet and I went down and added up all the, that was one of the things I did to kind of better understand the model. How many months would you have to participate to get your money back, basically, and then start making profit? and it was quite a few, if I remember correctly. So that might be something we want to note, that just from a making it interesting for the user perspective. And again, there's maybe other ways around this. We can display values that are still incrementing, but it's a concern I have.
Yeah, I mean, how long it takes is going to be completely related to how much activity there is, right? If nobody registers any FIO addresses or domains, then there's no payouts, right? If a bunch of people do, then there is. Of course, those people are also participating, albeit at a lesser amount than the early people, right? So they are creating a net benefit for them, and ultimately, the program eventually ends, and and yet all these participants keep. It doesn't end for them. New people can't sign up. So I had a specific thought, Pablo, to throw out here related to distribution of rewards. The way this is written right now is it just happens sort of semi-automatically. Users really don't have any control over it, right? It's awarded based on what's coded in here. Would there be an advantage? I could see some potential complications to just have users basically claim their credits when it's over a certain amount, where the user is the one who's taking action to claim them, in the similar way to how if you get credit card credits, you usually have to do something, even if it's just to apply it to the balance of your card, right? You have to take action. Would that be beneficial? And the reason I'm thinking maybe it would be beneficial from a marketing standpoint is that would be a place where it would be easy for us to ask for email address. It doesn't have to be required, but at least ask for it. And all of a sudden, maybe it creates the way for the protocol to be able to have better direct communication with its users beyond Twitter and Telegram and social media.
I'm not sure. I thought about this. We discussed this with Ed and trying to do this. The big challenge is, and I know we're going to talk about tools tomorrow, but there is if you are saying I need to claim, then either the wallet needs to build that functionality, or I'm going to need to export my private key from the Edge wallet, import it into whatever dApp we have developed in order to do that, right?
Well,
And to me,
maybe
that's going to be a very high
not.
threshold.
Maybe not. I mean, claiming always is still going to go to the FIO account that it's supposed to go to. So somebody can't come in and steal your funds. If it was username and password protected, yes, somebody could, if they corrupted that, could come in and force a claim, which just means you're going to get your tokens claimed earlier than maybe you do, but they're going to go to your wallet, your account with your private key. They can't redirect them. So I'm not so sure it's that complicated. I think it can just be username and password based.
It can be username and password based because somebody's got to make the call to the blockchain and somebody's got to sign that call with a private key. So either you have a claim that can only be made by the holder of the NFT, or you have a claim that can be made by anybody. And we did actually contemplate with Ed this approach where you basically, anybody can call and whoever calls, they kind of get processed first and everybody else gets processed last. But there's also another complexity with kind of this ad hoc calling is if you have BPs calling this on a regular basis, then we can actually process through all of the payouts very efficiently and quickly. If you start accruing those payments over a longer period of time where somebody didn't make a call for like 4 buckets and now you have to iterate through 4 buckets, it just adds more complexity. I just don't think it's worth it, especially if the only reason you're doing it is you can get an email address.
Well, I wouldn't underestimate that part, but I think we'll have opportunities to get email addresses through the dApp that we're going to have to build. So basically some of the other things. So, all right.
All right, and the other change that we're making here is we're modifying the block producer reserve, as we've discussed, and we're modifying this from 10 million to 30 million. So there's additional 20 million being added here. So if you look at the numbers, I think that's important from a kind of token economic standpoint. We're adding 30 million new tokens, 10 for FIO holders, FIOP holders, and 20 for block producer reserve. And in order to stay at a billion total token minted, we're actually recommending that the FIO address giveaway buckets are reduced to accommodate that 30 million increase, so that the total supply is still fixed at a billion. And the way we've kind of debated what's the best way of doing this, and there's like several ways to do this, but I feel like the best approach would be to actually use an on-chain function that exists, which is called retire tokens, which basically just burns tokens. And it burns this from the EOS.io account. So look, the way this would work is the foundation would basically take 30 million of its tokens and transfer it to the EOS.io account. And then the block producers would actually burn the 30 million FIO, which would take them out of circulation.
So I had a couple of questions about that. So first, we kind of skipped over. I still had a second question about the bounty. I'm very concerned about the bounty creating a Sybil attack. I think we talked about this previously. Not adding this additional user, this bounty prevents a Sybil attack. Adding it, depending on the modeling, potentially creates exactly a Sybil attack, which.
Well, the way it's proposed here, I don't think it does. So probably you want to explain it, but it's
the way
it's a matching of what's actually otherwise generated.
Right. So the idea from the Sybil attack prevention, and that was my concern when initially we discussed this bounty, is what you do not want in a Sybil attack is you do not want to have predictability, right? Because if I have predictability, I know that if I spend $1 today and in a month I'm going to get $3 back or whatever, then I'm going to do this. So any type of, for example, of a bounty that was just fixed would offer that predictability. But the way the bounty is right now, it basically increases the distribution that is determined by the fee, and the attacker has no way of knowing what is going to be the future income stream from the fees. So they kind of have to take a bet, and they may lose, right? So that's kind of the idea, that you don't know what is going to be your payout, even with the bounty, because the bounty is directly tied to fees. So for example, if there was no fees collected in the next 30 days, the bounty would be 100% of zero, right? So it would still be zero, and nobody's going to get anything. So that was kind of the thinking behind that.
But the flip side of this, even as it's done now, let's say, next month, there's only one person that sends a fee and it's me. I get a 100% bonus on my fee. Now I just got refunded for both of them, right? So I guess is that kind of the threshold?
No, because the other thing that is unknown is you also, not only do you not control the fees that are being paid to the chain, you also do not control the recipients of the award, right? So there is already going to be, a number of those that are kind of preset, because we're awarding those fee ups to existing holders, right, of domains and addresses. But also you don't know how many people are actually going to register a FIO address in the next period. So you kind of have those two variables that are making it hard for you to predict what's going to happen. Okay. But it is true that, and that's why I think we need to spend a little bit more time modeling all of those percentages, because I am concerned that at some future date, right, where if we didn't get the decay rate correct, right, and at a particular growth, you can get to a situation where somebody can look at this and say, at the current growth of fees and the current fee ops, if I register now, there's a good chance I'll get this for free in 6 months, and whatever that is potentially an issue or not. I think we need to spend some more time modeling the variables.
Yeah, because I do think, like, depending on how big of a percentage you make that, it becomes obviously attackable, right? It's 100%. We're saying, well, double maybe isn't attackable, but you make it high enough, and it gets to the point where the pot is so big that the multiplier, if I throw enough money at it, I'm going to have enough potential to have a big portion of the fees for the next month that I'm doubling on or tripling on or quadrupling on, right? So at a certain point in time, if you make it too high, it becomes game theory like a good thing to do, because
but it also doesn't.
But I don't think it's I don't think it's the bonus. It's just the total payout, right? You can argue that you can get to the same situation without any bonus, right? It's just you can get to a point where the 10% is so high, right? That and the decay rate didn't go down quickly enough that somebody can say, hey, if I buy my FIO address right now, there is like a 98% chance that I'll get my money back in 2 months or whatever.
Well, no, I think
Even if there was no bonus.
I think there's a significant difference here because the fees never go beyond 100%. By injecting a bonus, they're going beyond 100%. And I had the same concern with the user bounties. Like, in theory, if we get a bad actor integrating FIO and we start doing a FIO address giveaway, like, they could manipulate that because they know they're getting that 40% bonus on the TPIT. We still control that as a foundation to turn off the spigot and be like, we think you're shady. We're no longer going to allow you to get free FIO addresses from us. This is different in that we cannot turn it off, right?
Well, but
So
it's
as
not,
soon as
it's
you go
not,
beyond 100%.
it's not 100% even today, because let's say it is 20%, 10% and 100% bonus, right? Which, by the way, only happens at the beginning, but let's say that is it. So it's 20% and the maximum you can get from TPIT is 50%. The other is going either to the foundation or the block producers. So that's already at 70% for you, right? So I just don't think the way you look at this is you're gonna basically get your money back. The way I'm looking at this is that the 10 or 20% can, you know, even if there's no bonus, so forget about the 100%, the 10% can in theory exceed, you know, the cost of you paying a FIO address, right? I mean, you can pay $2, and if the protocol is super successful, you will be getting $200 a month in X number of months, right, or years or whatever. So and partially that is the goal, actually. I guess we have to look out for is to ensure that there's no predictability to that, meaning that somebody cannot just say, oh, I know this is what's going to happen, therefore I'm just going to attack.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I don't want to belabor the point anymore. It's just, to me, it's different. In the scenario you just described, those $200 a month that are coming in are a percentage of an actual whole of real people that paid real money. This is different, and then we're minting tokens. There was no real payment by a real person. That's a significant difference in the tokenomics model, and I want to make sure we're clear on that.
I don't think so. So like, you can change this, for example, to 20% and remove the bonus, and that would have the same impact.
No, I fundamentally disagree with that, because you're still pulling from the same 100% of someone who actually paid, for example, Bitcoin, $2 in Bitcoin or whatever. It's not a minting of new tokens into the ecosystem. Whenever you introduce inflation at whatever level, you're creating an opportunity for whoever gets the inflation to dominate the system on some level. And so
but the inflation is so small and it's capped, and I just don't share that
the math, Pablo or Luke, if you play out the math of how much, you know, give user X, whatever that user is, how much they're going to be paid out is based on the, you know, the amount of economic input to the chain, and then the percentage of that that's distributed out to the group and their portion of it. So the bounty doesn't change their portion of it. It does change the amount that's going to be distributed out. That's what it changes. So doubling, which it only, by the way, as proposed, does for 30 days, doubling the payout is exactly the same as taking the 10% and making it 20%. The economics are 100% the same.
I don't agree. Again, there's a fixed pie, let's say of 100 FIO, and I give you 10 or I give you 20, it's still 100 FIO. In another model, it's 110 FIO, 120 FIO, it's new tokens.
It doesn't, in terms of the economics to a prospective Sybil attacker, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. If I'm going to get, if the pool is either 10 or 20%, that's the pool, and I get my share of that pool. And so whether that extra 10% came from a temporary bounty or whether it came from a fixed increase in the percentage from 10 to 20%, which we could do, it doesn't, the pool is the same size in both of those examples. And the amount I get as a FIO address holder, whether I'm legitimate or a Sybil attacker, will be the same share of that pool and the same absolute amount. It's absolutely irrelevant whether it came as a temporary bonus or as a permanent doubling of the share. Now, if you exceeded the 100% of what was being paid in, then things start to change. But that's not what's happening here. We're not exceeding the 100% of what was paid in. We're basically saying the allocation to FIOP holders is the equivalent of 20% on day one. 30 days later, it's going to be equivalent, I think, to what, 19.5% or something like that.
All right, maybe you and I can talk about it offline a little bit more,
Yeah.
because I still feel like you are exceeding the fees that were paid in because you're minting tokens to add a bonus.
I
No,
don't think that matters. I think that even if you were to exceed the 100%, it's just input. Yes, somebody's putting in this money, but is your concern that it's attackable? Is that your concern, or are you just saying that we shouldn't be minting tokens? I'm not sure what the problem.
Well, I think we all agree at a certain percentage it's attackable, right? I'm trying to figure out what that percentage is. If I give you 100,000% return, clearly you're going to just throw as much money as you can at this because you're getting so much new tokens minted.
No,
happen,
because they're not going to you. So it's like if there's a stadium of 100,000 people and I come in and I say, hey, I want you to distribute $1,000 to these people, and the stadium owner says, great, I'll double that, I'll distribute 2,000. You're still going to get only a fraction of the 2,000 back because it's being distributed across a large number of people. If you were the only person who registered the FIO address ever, then yes, you can start making this argument. But if you're going to have 2 million, 5 million, 10 million people, and you don't know how many, and you're just going to get a small fraction of that, then it doesn't matter. You can never attack it in a way where you're going to get immediate benefit.
Yeah, what's being doubled, just so you're clear, Luke, what's being doubled is not the total economic input of the chain. That is not what's being doubled. What's being doubled is the allocation to the pool for distribution. So the 10% in this example, in this model, that's what's being doubled initially to 20%. And then that doubling lasts for 30 days, and then it declines every month thereafter. The amount of the bonus declines.
We probably already spent too much time on it. Once we get the models,
sure.
I will mess with the models to see if my concern is valid by going well beyond 100%, a doubling of the 10 to 20, and to see what that does to the system. Where it's like, I agree, you don't know as an individual what you're going to get, but if the math is the math, then it could create a stampede with a whole bunch of people wanting
to get it. Well, we agree we don't want a simple attack. I think
we want the stampede, actually, right?
We do want a stampede.
Not if it's civil attackers. I certainly don't. That's my concern exactly. So yeah.
So, pardon me if I'm not understanding correctly, but instead of minting new tokens, would it make sense to possibly look at buying tokens off the market so that we're actually putting pressure on the FIOs?
All on chain.
We don't have funds.
There's no non-on chain activity.
And we don't have funds to buy tokens, but it doesn't matter whether they're minted or whether they were sitting in a pool from an economic standpoint. It's just technically it's better and easier if they're minted on the fly and less risk. But anyway, I mean, ultimately the goal of this, flipping to the other side is I have the concern. You're going to start out of the gate. You're going to have, you're going to have a zero. You're going to have a bunch of participants when this thing launches, because you have all the people who registered in one way or another before co-op goes live, and they are going to have some participation ability. All the FIO domains will be immediate participants in this. And so on day one, second one, you have zero income, right? On day two, second two, et cetera. And so my concern is to make sure that early on, there's at least enough token payouts that people are like, oh, this is cool, because otherwise they won't be motivated to tell people about it. And the whole point is to motivate them. So you got to get it going. You got to prime the pump, use whatever metaphor you want to get it going. And that's why I think having this is important. I agree. We got to make sure it's not Sybil attackable, which I'm pretty confident the way it's being done is not. But yeah, we can prove that.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to take so much time, but these are the important things to figure out. So thanks.
Okay, I think I don't want to go into the details of kind of, what's happening at each call level. I don't think that's relevant here. I'd probably stop here in terms of the review. So I don't know, I'll just open it up to everybody. If you guys believe, I think there was a couple of things. There's discussion that we want to update these percentages to 15 and 20. I think that we potentially want to look at the distribution, whatever that 10 should be higher than that. And is there anything else I missed?
I have one specific question that I'm not clear on. So just with this, the way it's written right now, we talk about 30-day payout period. So these buckets of FIO tokens will accumulate for 30 days, and then somebody can make the call and they'll be paid out for that 30-day period, right? That's basically how it works.
Correct.
And the 30 days presumptively is 30 days from whenever it goes live, and then just on a rolling basis every 30 days. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if I register within the 30-day window and pay for a FIO address within the 30-day window, then I'm going to participate in the payout for that one, aren't I?
Currently, no, because the rule, and we can obviously change that, says that your NFT needs to be registered before the start of the window in order
Perfect.
to be
Okay,
paid for
no,
that
that,
window.
all right, that's what I was asking. I think it should be that way. I don't think you should get a payout within the 30-day window or whatever that window is in which you paid. I mean, otherwise it really messes up the economics in the short term.
And it kind of creates this thing where at the last day of the window, you're like,
Right,
you can look
right.
at the economics and like, should I buy it or not,
Yeah,
right?
okay,
You
all right,
should
that's
have
what
at least 30 days
yeah,
of
no,
uncertainty.
I just wanted to clarify that. I agree. So yeah, on the 10%, I'd be inclined to increase it again. My biggest concern in the short term is making sure it's interesting enough that people get excited about and spread the word so that you can actually, start the forest fire, right? You want people fanning the flames. Do we absolutely need to? With the bounties, I was less concerned about it because we are increasing that number with that bounty, right? It's actually 20% on day one. So I don't know, and this is hard. I think this is, we shouldn't spend a lot of time in this here. Acheron is doing the Monte Carlo modeling. I haven't seen that yet. I don't know how helpful that will be. I hope it's helpful in helping decide some of these numbers, because otherwise we are just completely guessing, honestly. The Monte Carlo modeling is the only analytically rational way I can think to get some handle on what might make sense here. Even doing spreadsheets doesn't help, because everything's based on assumptions about how many people sign up and when and that sort of stuff. And obviously, without running like a bazillion scenarios, which is what Monte Carlo modeling does, it's hard to really understand what that means.
I have a friend that may be able to help with that a little bit. Like he did some similar things for stuff. James, I'm thinking of Marco, who had some examples for some modeling they did. And it was like, you hit a button and every single time it recalculates randomness in a way and graphs it in a way you could kind of see what, even extreme outliers, what does it do to the model? And maybe when we get a little more structured, he might be able to help with that a little bit. But related to that is I feel like with these kind of monthly ideas we're talking about, we're kind of getting back into this cohort thing that we kind of moved away from. And I'm just curious if there's any concerns or thoughts on that. Like, why 30 days as opposed to like daily? Is this just a technical thing?
Well, the Monte Carlo modeling hopefully will help us decide from a incentive standpoint what the time frame is that is optimal. But yeah, it's computing power every time we run. The blockchain runs this call. It's got to go through every entry and allocate and potentially transfer tokens. So you don't want to be doing that every hour.
Yeah, it is a technical constraint. So so there is kind of two, previously we also talked about the cohorts for the purposes of earning, right? And that has basically gone away, right? Because it's just being determined by the FIOPs. Once you get the FIOPs, that basically determines that quote unquote cohort. But the payout is still done, has to be done on some interval, because there's no way to process that in real time. Unlike TPIT rewards, for example, which are going to a single account, it can be processed in real time. Here, somebody's paying a fee, and that fee needs to go, let's say, to 1 million people, right? You cannot do that in real time, meaning you have to batch that, and you have to do that on some interval, and you have to iterate through every single NFT, figure out how much they need to get, and then give it to them. So it has to be done on an interval. And honestly, from a technical standpoint, 30 days is kind of what we settled on as from a technology standpoint, we would recommend. Now, if we want to go to 21 or, something like that, that's certainly a discussion we can have. But if you say, hey, I want to go to a daily, that's probably too much of an overhead on the blockchain.
Gotcha. Okay.
Ultimately in this, the way to think about this is the value to the participants, ultimately is based on how many people are, actively paying for new or renewing addresses and domains in the future, and the decay rate. If there was no decay rate, if everybody got equal participation all the way along, the reality is the benefit really wouldn't be, it'd be like a discount for everybody. That would be pretty equally distributed, right? It would be just like getting a discount on your registration, but if everybody was in the co-op, then everybody who paid would get the benefit. And it's no different than just cutting the fees at that point. So the real benefit is that there's this decay rate, and ultimately it comes to an end. The suggestion here is 3 years. And so you are getting this residual that then users and activity presumptively continues to grow. And you ultimately get more and more, and you get it for forever.
All right, so the next step here is going to be to share it more broadly with the community, including sharing this video, this document, and of course tomorrow we have a call that kind of talks about the other pieces of this. So before we share this more broadly with the community, is there any changes? Do we want to change the 10%, or do we want to change, I guess, the bonus amount here from 10 to 15? Do we want to make any of those changes?
I would definitely change the 10 to 15. I mean, anything that gives an ability to have more impact quickly is valuable to us, and that will help impact from the period after which we announce it and before it actually goes live on mainnet.
I'm still a little confused at what those percentages actually mean. I've read through this like a number of times.
That's the increase in FIOPs. So if you register, if the program launches on day 1 and you register a FIO address, as I was showing you in this model, you're going to get 1 FIOP on 0 second. When you register, you're going to get 1 FIOP, right? If you register the first day, you're going to get 0.99 FIOP and so on, right? So all the people that registered before the program starts are going to get 1 FIOP plus that percentage.
Okay.
So if you register the FIO address a day before the program starts, you're going to get 1.15 if we change this to 15, right? FIOP instead of 1. If you registered in a pre-sale, you're going to get 1.2 FIOPs instead of 1.
So let me ask another question. Somebody registers a domain, they're going to have to register a FIO address as well to actually claim to get access to their tokens, or not? Because
no, they're going, the FIOP is going to get attached to the domain.
So, I mean, I do believe we're likely to see, I could be wrong, that, people who get really excited about this, what they're likely to do, because rationally it would be the rational thing to do, is that not to register a bunch of FIO addresses, but they will register a bunch of FIO domains, which obviously economically is great for the project, because they get 20x the benefit, and the domain itself may have value, right? So now they have a double win. They get the residual, but if they don't even have a FIO address, that is kind of weird. So there's no way for us to say, well, you still got to have at least a FIO address or something like that. There's no way to do that.
Not easily.
Are we worried about that, Luke? Does that concern you at all? I mean, mean, ultimately the goal is to drive utilization, right? I mean, that is.
Yeah. I mean, so are you
but-
thinking in terms of like a cyber squatting concern or just?
Well, no, we're gonna. I've never been concerned about cyber squatting. It's going to happen, and I think in the short term, it's actually really good for the
Yeah.
protocol. It'll fund a lot of activity. It's the same thing that happened on the World Wide Web, and it didn't kill it. But here, somebody can buy a bunch of domains and not even have a FIO address. So clearly, they're not using the protocol at all if they don't have a FIO address. I mean, you can't force anybody. Can't force anybody to use it.
But I don't think that's bad, David. I think that your analysis of the cyber squatting is right. I think if people are paying attention to us to make a market in our names, as long as they're fungible, and that there could be a secondary market, all we're doing is releasing it into the public and letting it have a life of its own.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I mean, from that argument, they are using the protocol. They're actually paying on-chain fees to get an NFT. That's using the protocol. It's just not using part of it that its core functionality set is a FIO address enabled functionality, but that is that's part of the functionality we enabled.
Taking the logic forward, the good thing about that system, if it sets up, is those people will then be incentivized to create ways to market their inventory, and will create awareness and a marketplace for us, right? And so we'll start to be decentralizing. So I like that. It's an act of decentralizing.
And arguably, if they get it, they'll understand that ultimately their domains are going to be worth a shitload more if FIO actually becomes, the standard usability layer for blockchain, right? Because hell, their domains are worth a shitload between the residual and the value of the name itself potentially. So, all right,
I think it's a good thing.
Good. I we'll see what happens. I think if we do this right and we market it right, and if we put in some of the ancillary tools we'll need, like getting a domain marketplace live, I actually think we'll see a significant surge in domain registrations as a result of this, where people are paying for domains versus what we have seen obviously in the past, which has been limited because of all the not transferability and all that stuff.
Well, one question I had about this was just whether it makes sense to start off with the 20 millions for the BP reserves or start out with 10 million, because 10 million lasted us about 6 months or so. We're kind of making this commitment for 12 months. And I mean, I guess there isn't really any downside to it. It's just
the downside. I guess there isn't. You can't take it back.
Well,
you can't reallocate it back to free FIO addresses.
The way I look at this is, remember that this is actually only minted if there are not enough fees on the chain, right? So the way I look at this is, if we overestimate it, right, and all of a sudden there is enough activity and the BPs are being paid, then that amount is never minted, and that's not a bad thing. And if we underestimate it, right, and we kind of get to the same situation we're in now, where we're saying, in like sometime soon, the rewards are going to run out and block producers' pay is going to be substantially reduced, and that's an issue. That's why I honestly don't think it's a problem.
Okay, because my thought was, you could make that decision 6 months from now again if you wanted to. If you go with 10 million, for example, and then at the same time, we're kind of assuming, no big deal if, I mean, I guess the kind of worst case scenario would be, holy moly, everyone and their mother from Walmart to Amazon to everybody wants, free FIO addresses, and we want to incentivize them. So we're going to do some deal to make that happen. And we actually start running out. But we have so many there that's probably just not even a concern. So, okay.
I have one more question. We were talking about showing this document to a wider audience now, but we haven't yet done the Monte Carlo on the numbers to know whether we're comfortable with the 10-15 or the 15-20 and the different ratios. Would it make sense to put X's in there for now, as opposed to hard numbers if we don't really know where the bottle breaks and where the sweet spot is?
I think it makes it harder for people to understand it, but what we might do along the lines of that suggestion is probably just add in something in big and bold letters at the top that says, the numbers that are currently in here are draft, they're undergoing analysis, and
I would do that.
Change.
Just be careful, because we don't want to get in a situation where no good deed goes unpunished, and then you know, some people be unhappy if we raise it, other people be unhappy if we lower it. So I don't want to set expectations with it.
Yeah, but at the same time, I actually do want to start getting that feedback, right? Because if we just were to say X's, then people are like, oh,
Right.
okay, if it's
So-
only if it's 5%, I'm okay with
Right.
it. And then a 20 shows up, and they're like, holy shit, right? So I'd like to start getting that feedback sooner rather than later, and we can kind of incorporate that feedback into whatever is the final decision on those numbers.
Yeah,
All
so
right,
just add in the disclaimer at the top, Pavo, in bold, you know, that the specific numbers, you know, in this draft, you know, are draft and are undergoing analysis and subject to change, just so they.
And also what we put in Pavel's point that, you know, and we welcome input.
Oh, absolutely. That's basically the next step for this FIP, right? Is just to say, hey, we have now kind of went through a number of iterations. Now we put a stake in the ground. Here's what this is, and it describes functionality and it describes the variables. And please provide feedback, right? And then that's officially going into a community review right now, and that's exactly what we need to do is get more feedback from participants on anything that's in this FIP. The only question, and we can kind of ask this at the end, but I have another question on kind of logistics here. But let's. Is there anything else you guys want to modify conceptually in here?
I think we should get broader input. Let's get it out for input. So we need to get coding on this.
All right.
And, you know, I would, you know, not give a long tail to comments because I do believe we got to get started and take a little bit of risk. But
okay. Well, that's fine. Let's end it here.